Alrighty, it's 11:01 by my clock. Let's go ahead and get things started. Appreciate you guys being here. This is a great crowd. Appreciate everybody's interest. This is, in terms of registrations, this is probably the biggest webinar we've ever had, which I think just goes to show the level of interest that's out there in Microsoft Teams, and particularly in using Microsoft Teams for training. And when we have a title like Training and Development in Microsoft Teams, obviously that is that's a very broad title. We could spend days talking about everything you can do with training in Microsoft Teams. So in this webinar, we're going to focus on some of the basics, some of the ways you can use Microsoft Teams and some of the built-in tools for virtual training and also for e-learning or online training. We're also going to look at some third-party apps that you can add, and we'll talk about some ways to use Teams in ways you might not expect. Jignesh asked if there will be a recording. Yes, there will be. Whether I remember to send it out or not is a different question, but if you don't get it, feel free to email me. I am Chip Reaves, by the way. Let's go ahead and dive into our agenda. If I can find my mouse. There we go. So yeah, so we're going to talk about the case for Microsoft Teams. We're going to look at some of the built-in tools, look at some of the apps you can buy or not buy, some of the apps you can download in the Microsoft Teams App Store. And then we're going to look at two apps that our company's created, the Bigger Brains Teams Training app and the training reinforcement chatbot that we call BrainBot. So quick bit about me. My background is primarily in IT. I spent 30 years as an IT consultant. I founded and ran a global IT services franchise called Computer Troubleshooters. And then I've been running Bigger Brains for the last 8 or 9 years at this point. So I've got a background both in technology and also in training and development, which hopefully will help us out today. A little bit about Bigger Brains. We're primarily known as an off-the-shelf e-learning content provider. We have a library of about 170 courses that are available through some of the top training resellers and IT companies around the world. We've been honored to win a good number of awards, Best IT Skills Training from eLearning Magazine, as well as being featured very recently, last month, on the 2020 watch list for the top 20 the 20 companies on the watch list for online learning libraries from training industry. So we appreciate that. We're also a Microsoft Silver partner. I'm going to assume that everybody on this call knows about Microsoft Teams. That may be a bad assumption, but I'm going to assume that when you see a name like training inside Microsoft Teams, that you already have an interest in Microsoft Teams, or at least a curiosity about Microsoft Teams. But just to give you an idea of this juggernaut that is Microsoft Teams, it's only about 3 years old, going on 3.5 years old now. It's still a fairly young app, but the growth and the adoption rate has been just absolutely astounding. In March, right about the time that the whole work from home quarantines were starting to happen in a lot of countries around the world, Microsoft had a big announcement that they had achieved 44 million daily average users in Microsoft Teams. A month later, they announced they had reached 75 million daily average users. Teams quickly became the go-to platform for a lot of companies that needed to suddenly start working from home because it provided all the tools that people needed in terms of chat and conversation. And for a lot of companies, they already had it because they were already on Office 365. Russ asks, why is this not hosted in Microsoft Teams? It's a good question. We've traditionally done our webinars in Zoom. We do our meetings in Microsoft Teams. The webinar controls, the registration and everything for Zoom is a little bit easier than Teams. And we'll talk about some of the limitations with Microsoft Teams as we go along too. It's not a sales pitch for Microsoft Teams, but I am a big fan. I do think Microsoft's done a really good job with the product overall. It's not to say it's perfect. There's certainly a lot of places where there's room for improvement. We'll talk about some of those as well. Assuming everybody has seen Microsoft Teams and knows what it looks like. The other side of our business, of course, being an e-learning company, is we teach Microsoft Teams. Now we have about 30 teachers that work in Bigger Brains, but the Microsoft Teams course is the one that I teach, having an IT background. And it's one of our top selling courses and one of the top selling courses for a lot of our partners, especially over the last few months. So I think we've got a pretty good perspective on both the technical details of Microsoft Teams and a little bit on how to use it in a training environment. But let's think about what that means. If you were going to conjure the ideal learning environment, if you were going to create a situation optimized for learning, what would that look like? Now, I did some research online, and I found this list, which I think matches most of my criteria. You've got to have some way to convey information. In a physical classroom, that's fairly obvious. You've got your voice. You hopefully have a whiteboard or a blackboard or whatever. You may have a presentation or projector. You need to have opportunities for discussion and Q&A. Again, in a physical classroom, that's obvious. In an online tool, it's less obvious. It needs to be easily accessible. And this is one place where I think Teams and most of the online apps beat the physical classroom environment, because it's certainly easier to log into Microsoft Teams than it is to schedule time and go to a classroom facility to take a course. You also need minimal distractions to promote focus, different ways to engage the learner to keep them interested. You need opportunities for practice and growth, the ability to quiz and assess progress, ways to ensure that all the learners are contributing. You need a cohesive learning community where everybody is focused on collaboration and helping the group learn more about whatever is the subject that they're learning. And then you need tools for long-term learning reinforcement, ideally. Teams does a lot of this well. There's some of these that Teams does not do well, and that's the ones that are struck out or grayed out here. I would say that Teams actually does a poor job of minimal distractions, because the very fact that Teams is the hub where we all do a lot of our business nowadays means that while you're in any kind of learning setting in Microsoft Teams, you're just a click away from all of your messages, all your project work, other activities happening in your organization. So it actually brings the distractions a little more front and center versus sequestering yourself in a classroom environment, a physical classroom environment, which of course is hard to do at the moment during the pandemic, but one day will be available again. In terms of opportunities for practice and growth, it really depends. There are some opportunities. For example, I do know some people that are doing virtual sales training through Microsoft Teams with interactions with a coach. So there are some ways you can use Teams for opportunities for practice. But if you're learning something like pipeline maintenance or car repair or something that requires you to be in a certain environment, that is maybe not a great opportunity, or maybe not a great situation where Microsoft Teams is a great fit. It's also not necessarily a way to are good at ensuring that all learners are contributing. When you're in a group environment, whether it's a virtual classroom or an e-learning app, there can be people who are just attending and not actually getting anything out of the class. With any kind of e-learning situation, there's always some way to circumvent the process, unless you're using a proctoring service, which there are some of those as well. And of course, in a virtual classroom, a live classroom environment, you may have people that are asleep in the back of the room or whatever, or quiet people who don't feel comfortable speaking up in front of other people and may have that same fear in a virtual environment. Now, I will say Teams has added some new features that really do particularly well with that last one, though. But the big advantage, the major advantage that Teams has, is in this concept called workflow learning. According to Training Magazine, training content, to meet the definition of workflow learning, training content must meet the learner where he or she is instead of the other way around. It must be readily accessible within the learner's natural work context. And I think this is the huge advantage of Microsoft Teams. If we're already in Microsoft Teams for all of our daily activity, for all of our work communications, for our file collaboration, for our project work, and our training opportunities are just a click away, we don't have to remember a login for an LMS and all that sort of thing. That to me is the smoothest way to transition the learner from their working activities to their learning activities, because it's all in the same workflow. Now here at Bigger Brains, we've been using Teams since 2017. I will say in 2017, when Teams first came out, it was not well received here. It's one of those things where you really need a critical mass of users to start using it before it makes sense. And we kind of finally got to that point around the end of 2018. Today, it's extremely active in our core staff, which is only 9 people. Just in the last week, I pulled these statistics this morning. These 9 people in the internal staff have sent 1,200 messages and hosted 13 meetings just in the last 7 days. That's a lot for a small team. And of course, for big companies, you're getting into tens of thousands. So it's a popular place to be. It's a place where a lot of your users are spending most of their day anyway. Even if they aren't actively in Teams on the desktop, a lot of people will have Teams on their mobile device so they can get notifications and answer chat messages with colleagues and things like that. So the big advantages for Teams, it's instantly accessible. It can be used on your desktop, your mobile device, or your tablet. It's got built-in tools for conversation, for file sharing, and for meetings. And that's really huge. I mean, anytime you've got a group training activity, you need to have a way for them to talk to each other. And I know most LMSs have some kind of a forum or some kind of a message feature. In my experience, those are rarely used or rarely used by a majority of the people. With Teams, because it's kind of the natural way you're communicating anyway, and it's right there, it's really easy to tap into and really easy to build that kind of collaborative community. There's no apps to download in theory because everything's hosted inside Microsoft Teams. Even when you add a third-party app, like some of the ones we're going to look at, to Microsoft Teams, in most cases, it's fully inside Microsoft Teams. And in most cases, you don't need to log in to use it. It uses your Teams login. There are a couple of exceptions that we found that don't do that. No bookmarks to save, no extra passwords to the LMS to remember, and so on and so forth. There are a couple of disadvantages. We'll talk about those as we go along. Let's start off by looking at the tools that are built into Microsoft Teams that can help with learning. And when we're talking about learning, we're talking about both live training situations where you've got a instructor-led class or workshop or whatever, and e-learning or online training situations where it's self-paced. The learners are taking themselves through some type of training, whether it's video or some kind of activity. So the 5 built-in training tools we're going to look at are Meetings, PowerPoint, Stream, Forms, and OneNote. There are others. You could certainly make an argument for a lot of the Office 365 apps, could be used in some kind of training situation. But we're going to look at these 5 as I think the ones that are easiest to use and probably most commonly used in a training situation. And let's start off with Meetings, which raises the question that Russ asked a few minutes ago of why this isn't hosted in Teams. Teams is really a great tool for meetings. You can do on-demand small group meetings. You can do scheduled class workshop type meetings. The big advantages to using Teams or using meetings inside Teams are it's free. And I mean that both in terms of if your organization already has Office 365, then you're already paying for it anyway. If your organization is not paying for Office 365, there is a free version of Teams as well. It doesn't have all the features, but a good bit of what we're going to talk about today still works in the free version of Teams. The meeting app inside Teams has better than average audio and video quality. It's not bad. I think there are some tools that are better, but Teams is certainly way more than adequate. It's really come a long way. It's very easy to use. I haven't had any kind of connection issues with it in quite a long time. So it's great for that sort of thing. It also has a unique ability to share PowerPoint slide decks in a different way. When we share a PowerPoint presentation like we're doing here, I'm advancing the slides. You guys are following along with me. If you're curious what the next slide is going to be, well, tough. You have to wait for me to get there. If you missed something on a previous slide, well, you have to wait for me to send out the recording and hope that I remember to send out the recording. With Teams, when you go to share a PowerPoint presentation, you get the option to let the learner control their own slide deck. And when you do, they can advance and go backwards inside the slides whenever they want to. They can also click to view the same slide the presenter is viewing. So it gives them more flexibility, more control. You can also give them the ability to download the slides. There's a collaborative whiteboard. If you haven't used the whiteboard feature, particularly if you're on a Windows 10 computer where the Microsoft Whiteboard app can be downloaded from the App Store on the Windows App Store onto your Windows computer, that works extremely well, particularly the app version. Now, the version that's built into Teams works okay. It's got limited functionality. It has a couple of pens, and they've added some features lately. It does have the Post-it notes now, and I think you can do images now. But the app in Windows 10 works a lot better. There's also an app for iOS devices. I don't think there's an app yet for Mac OS that works the same. If I'm wrong, somebody please correct me in the chat. The other nice thing about Teams is I mentioned the conversation aspect. Any conversation that's happening during a meeting is saved wherever the meeting context is. So if the meeting is being hosted in a channel, that conversation is saved inside the channel. If the meeting is not hosted in a channel, then the meeting conversations are going to be stored in a chat, and we'll look at kind of where those are in just a minute. That's also a great way to have a standing meeting with, say, key employees or colleagues, where you can have it in a chat, and you can both come back to that chat and look at your previous notes anytime. You have the ability to raise your hand. You have the new Together mode. Just curious from the chat, how many of you have tried the Together mode yet? Has anybody tried that yet? Has anybody seen it yet? It is very new. It has come out in the last 2 to 4 weeks. A lot of tenants don't even have it yet. It's being rolled out, and they say that everybody will have it by the end of August. This is one of those tools that I don't think anybody asked for. I don't think anybody, this wasn't like one of those big demand things like some things we're going to talk about in a second, where somebody said, we really need to have this. Microsoft introduced this about a month ago, and it's brilliant. I'll show you what it looks like in the next slide. The last pro on here, with Microsoft Teams, you can have up to 20,000 attendees. That's probably a little bit more than you'd have in a virtual classroom, but you do have that higher limit. Zoom is limited to 500 as far as I know. This is what Microsoft Together mode looks like. You've seen on Zoom and on Microsoft Teams where you can blur out the background or you can have virtual backgrounds. With Together mode, it takes that a step further. It takes everybody's background away and puts you in an auditorium beside each other, which at first struck me as kind of silly and kind of useless. But look at what it does. It takes away all the distractions, and all you're left with are people's faces and body language, which is absolutely perfect for a training event when you want to see if people are paying attention, when you want to see if they're getting it or if they're confused. This is a great way to view your meeting attendees, your students, your learners, without the distractions and be able to better interact with them. There's also a lot of studies that Microsoft released that say that this actually reduces the strain on your brain. It actually makes it less likely that you'll have headaches after long virtual online meetings. So it's a very cool mode. If you haven't seen it, look for it in the 3-dot menu when you're inside a Microsoft Teams meeting. Again, not all tenants have it yet. In particular, the Mac app doesn't have it yet, but they say that everybody's going to have it by the end of August. So Teams Together mode is a feature that nobody asked for. For those of you who have had meetings in Teams before, what feature would you like to see that you don't have yet? I'm testing a theory because I get a lot of comments about this. What feature would you like Microsoft Teams meetings to have that it doesn't have yet? Aaron says breakout rooms. Laurie says breakout rooms. Milton says breakout rooms. Robert says breakout rooms. Jackie says, or Maria says breakout rooms. Jackie says popping out any and all windows. Yeah, breakout rooms. It's the #1 request for a feature that Zoom does a great job of and that Microsoft Teams does not have. Now, there is a way to do breakout rooms in Microsoft Teams. It's kind of clunky. I'm going to demonstrate it for you. It has some advantages, but Microsoft says that a legitimate breakout room feature is coming maybe sometime this year. The other one that's often requested is the ability to do polls. Zoom has a great polling feature that you can use in the middle of a meeting. Microsoft doesn't have that. I haven't seen any information on if there's, I'm sure that's under development with Microsoft, but I haven't seen any information on when that might be coming. You can do polls inside a PowerPoint presentation. We'll talk about that some a little bit later. So yeah, the cons of the meetings. If you're in a low bandwidth situation, if your internet connection is not great, then I don't think Teams does as good a job as Zoom or Skype does in maintaining a stable connection. And there's no polling feature and there's no breakout rooms. As I mentioned with PowerPoint, there are some add-ins you can use to do live polling inside a PowerPoint presentation, so you can kind of make it work that way. Poll Everywhere is the one that most people have heard of. There's also Vbox and Glisser. If you do a Google search on PowerPoint interaction or PowerPoint interactivity tools or just PowerPoint polls, you'll find a lot of those. But let me show you how the breakout room feature can work in Microsoft Teams. So I'm here in my Microsoft Teams, and I have a team called Breakout Test. It's almost like I made it for this very purpose. Here's how it would work. As the meeting organizer, let's say you're the teacher, you would schedule a meeting in a channel, which we've cleverly called a main meeting. I called it a main meeting because the channels are sorted alphabetically and I wanted it to be on top. So here we have a meeting that Marin scheduled for today at 11. Now, if I click on this as an attendee, it will take me into that meeting. Because I have access to this channel, I'm automatically an attendee. You'll notice that I have other channels labeled as breakout rooms. Breakout 1 also has a scheduled meeting. Breakout 2 also has a scheduled meeting. Breakout 3 does not, because I wanted to show you how to do it. So all you have to do is go to your calendar icon. We're going to make a new meeting. We're going to call this breakout 3 meeting. The important thing is we need to put it in that channel. So I'll go to add channel, and I'm going to type in breakout. I'm going to choose breakout 3. It helps that I don't have a lot of other channels called breakout. And I'm going to make sure it's at 11, which is when the other ones were scheduled. And we're going to make it for an hour, so I'll have it for 12. And I will send. So now we have that breakout 3 meeting scheduled, and my mouse is doing weird things. So if I go back to my Teams, now I see that meeting here in breakout 3. So the workflow would be like this. You would start everybody out in the main meeting. And if I'm an organizer, I'm probably going to send a link out just for the main meeting. I might post direct links to the other meetings, or at least the other channels in the meeting, or I might post them here in the conversation for people to see. So we have our together time. We talk about everything. When it's time to break out into breakout groups, either I've assigned people a number in advance, or I have to let them pick for themselves. There's not a randomly assigned feature like there is in Zoom, but each person exits the main meeting. They click over to the breakout channel. They join this meeting. Now you set it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. The nice thing is, as the organizer, I can pop in and out of all of these. So I can just come to a different channel. I can join that meeting. I'm not going to do it because joining a meeting while we're inside a meeting is just asking for trouble. But that's basically how you do it. It's not as easy as Zoom because you're counting on everybody to know how to do that. Your less tech-savvy users might have trouble with it. You're also counting on everybody leaving at the right time. Zoom has a timer where it'll force the breakout rooms closed. But an advantage it has is any conversation, any chat conversation that happens in those breakout meetings is going to be saved here in the posts for that breakout meeting. Likewise, if any files get shared in that meeting, they'll be saved here as well. So a little bit of a benefit to it, but I'm looking forward to the day that Microsoft has real breakout rooms. So while we're here in a Teams demo, let me answer a couple questions while we're here. Oh, I've got several of them. I'm not going to have time to answer all of them, so I'm going to try this. Angela says, I made a meeting, put the PowerPoint as an attachment. The participants came in later, weren't able to see the PowerPoint, only the presenters could. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm not sure why that would be. Amanda mentions the Poly app. The Poly app does work inside Teams for real-time polls. It does not work inside meetings, though. I really think that'd be an obvious thing for them to add as some Poly feature that would work inside meetings. Can you use forms as a poll option? Yes, in theory. It's not as easy, not as real-time. How do breakout rooms tie into learning? Well, the idea is you would have a group discussion and then break out into small groups where people may be more comfortable discussing in a small group, sharing their ideas, and then bring them back together and have each group, share their top ideas. It's just a way of building interaction and engagement. Ella says, I don't think you can use channels across organizations. If you have multiple organizations, probably not. They would have to be all members of the same organization. Okay, let's move along because I know we're going to run out of time. So we can use PowerPoint, I mentioned. Let me show you what that might look like. So I have a group called Classroom, or a team called Classroom. I'm going to add a channel. And let's call this Insider Data Loss. I'll add the channel. And the idea is that this channel, which might be inside another team or it might be inside a dedicated training team, is one where I want people to come and take a class on insider data loss. Now, everybody knows that you can add a PowerPoint slide. Oops, I clicked the wrong, no, I clicked the right thing. That you can add a PowerPoint slide and I can browse and grab a PowerPoint deck from any of the adjoining teams. One of the things a lot of people don't realize about PowerPoint is that you can narrate the slides and save that narration. So this is actually a course from one of our partners. It's Cardin Compliance. If you ever do need training on HIPAA compliance or healthcare related issues, Cardin's a great place to go. If I click this into presentation mode,
we'll be reviewing hiccup threat number 4, insider data loss.
So
when we mention insider data loss,
not going to go very far there, but you get the idea. Hopefully you guys heard that. Maybe yes, maybe no, but what we're hearing is the teacher's voice being played in the background. Now the drawback to doing this is that the person who clicks through to this tab has to know that they need to click on the start presentation button, which they can do either from down here at the bottom or up here under the slideshow tab, either way. So it's not perfect, but it is a way that you can use PowerPoint. And of course, you can always use, share PowerPoint in a live meeting and all of that sort of thing as well. Let's talk about, just lost track of what's next. Stream. Have any of you used Microsoft Stream? I'm very curious about this one. I'm going to bet all the answers are no. If anybody's used Microsoft Stream, post in the chat. Okay, we got some yeses. Okay, good. A lot of times in smaller organizations, they've never heard of Microsoft Stream, don't know it's there. It's the same sort of idea. Let's say that I wanted to make a class or make a channel for Teams training. Add that class. The same sort of idea, I can add a tab here and tie that to my Microsoft Stream, which I'm not seeing, so I can always type if I don't see it. And so I can paste directly to a channel or a particular video. I'm going to use a particular video, and I think I have the video pulled up. Oops. So now when people come in this channel, they'll see the video when they click on this tab. Which is an easy way to do it if you have video training. And again, they can have conversations back over here in the post section. They can also open that from here so they can chat along as they're watching the video. The advantage of using Stream versus something like YouTube, which of course you can use YouTube as well, is that Stream is more secure. And so you know that the videos can only be viewed by people who have permission to view them. Unlike a YouTube video where if the link or password, if you have a password protected video, is shared, then people outside the organization could still see it. Another thing that you can use with, in terms of internal tools, a great one that's already been mentioned in the chat, so you guys are smart and way ahead of me, is Microsoft Forms. Microsoft Forms is relatively new, maybe 2 years old, and it's a great tool for building any kind of form, surveys, that sort of thing, and for quizzes. It can do a scored quiz, and so we have a sample quiz here posted already in this channel. It's posted as a tab. Now, it's posted as a tab. We could also link it to a chat conversation. We could send it out to people in messages and that sort of thing. And this is a very simple form. What presentation way is a quick way to see type? I'm going to say normal view. Does a text box show an outline view? No, I think. And then you answer these however you appropriately will answer these. In the interest of time, I'm going to answer quickly and move on. When I submit these, the teacher, whoever created that form, will view my responses in their forms dashboard or by running forms reports. So again, a really handy, powerful tool, a lot better than it used to be. If you checked out Forms a couple of years ago, when we first, we did our first Forms course a couple of years ago, and it was a little clunky back then. It's come a long way. It's gotten a lot better. By the way, if you do need more training on any of these, just to make a blatant sales pitch, we do have e-learning for all of these available if you're interested. The other built-in tool that's helpful for classroom training is OneNote. And there is a OneNote for classrooms. I'm not going to go into it in detail here, but there is a OneNote for classrooms page where Microsoft gives a lot of examples on how teachers can use class notebooks to track progress, to let students collaborate, to send out information and all that sort of thing. OneNote is really popular with certain people. I kind of come and go with it. There's times when I use it every day and then times when I don't use it for 6 months. So those are the built-in tools that I wanted to talk about. The interesting thing to me is that there is a growing ecosystem of third-party tools that are designed to help facilitate learning inside Microsoft Teams. And I picked just a selection of them for us to look at. Go back to my slide deck here. Oops. So these are the ones we're going to look at today, and we're going to, again, in the interest of time, we're going to go very quickly over a lot of these. Some of these you may be familiar with. Some of these are more useful than others, I would say. But if you go to the Teams App Store and just do a search on training or learning, you'll find a lot of apps, including one of ours and a second app coming soon. When we first created our first learning app, BrainBot, it launched in the Teams App Store in January 2019. And I want to say there were maybe 6 or 7 total apps that would come up when you did a search. And when you do a search, not all the apps that came up were related to training and learning. It just, they happened to come up under the search. Today, there's 30, 40, maybe more. There's a lot of companies that are finding opportunities to either take tools they were already using in a classroom environment like Quizlet and bring it into Microsoft Teams, or who are taking some, their e-learning content or some other tool and bringing it into Microsoft Teams. I want to turn things over to Maren Reaves, who is our academic expert, also my wife. She joined our team here at Bigger Brains a few months ago, really in large part because of you guys. When we started to get more interest from teachers, particularly in the BrainBot app, we are primarily focused on corporate training, but we realized we needed somebody with an academic training background to help us know what would help teachers, quite frankly, in a school environment. And Maren has a long background in teaching in high school and also curriculum development at a local college. So I'm going to turn things over to her for her to show us the next two, Quizlet and Flipgrid. And Maren, I think I can turn my control over to you.
I've got control, I think. Well, I'm not sure.
Do you have control?
No, I just pretended to.
My mouse has died, apparently.
Maybe it's because I have control.
Oh, that may be.
Nope.
See if you can move the mouse.
No, I can't move your mouse. Just mine.
Oh, okay. Now my other mouse, the batteries have died, apparently. Oh. Okay, you should have control now.
Now I can. Okay, great. So if we go into, there we go. I'll start up here. So one of the options you can add to Teams is Quizlet. And Quizlet is mostly, just as Quizlet, is mostly used just for refreshing your memory and quizzing yourself. And there's multiple ways that that students can do that. So one of the options here is when you actually go and add a tab, you can add a Quizlet tab. And if you have a your own a teacher account or where you've got your own bits here, which I do, something like environmental science. So the flashcards work like this. And this is the only thing that works like within Teams. Everything else will send the student or the user out to a different a web browser page. They don't actually have to have a login to be able to do it, but you can actually write answers here too, which is a better way of refreshing your memory and learning something. So if you have a question like this, then you type in the answer. So that's quickly some of the ways that Quizlet can be used within Teams. And I'm not quite sure which one of yours is that to you. Okay, so there's different ways to add this in here. I've just put some information in here. Once you do add Quizlet, you're going to be able to put it within a post in Teams as well, because this is your little Quizlet icon that you can add things. I'm not sure if that's enough. You can add tabs or you can put it within posts. You can search for other teachers. It's just like when you go into Quizlet. If I wanted to learn anything about anything, I could type search from the post here and search about, aerospace or something. So that's how that works.
Sure, and Quizlet's been around for quite a long time, I understand, in the academic world. I had not heard of it, but there is a very large
Okay, I'm interrupting you because I'm looking at the comments, and somebody asked if I was your daughter. I'm just saying.
Oh,
I'm sorry, babe. No, I'm his wife.
okay. Um, yeah, but Quizlet's been around for a long time, and there's a large library of existing materials. Again, mostly focused on school topics. But if that's what you're teaching, that's a good place to go. Let's take a look at Flipgrid. We need to move along in the interest of time. This is a newer one, and it's interesting because Microsoft actually bought it a few years ago, so it's completely free. And it does work as a separate app, especially as a mobile app, but it also has a Teams app as well. Marion, you want to show us more about that?
The Flipgrid, yes. So this is new to me, but it's a cool kind of thing. Chip described it as TikTok for teachers, but there are in Flipgrid there are some courses or I don't know, modules that are put together by many different people that students can use, and you can be added to it to learn about. But one of the things that's interesting about this is just a way to set it up. You can add a video to it, and then maybe add a question. What new feature in Outlook 2019 do you think that you will use the most? So you have the students watch it, you ask them a question about it, and then the student records a response rather than typing something in or doing everything. Because with the online learning, I think it's kind of a neat option, because when you have asynchronous online learning, most everything needs to be written in and typed in and that kind of thing. So this is an opportunity for students just to record a response, audio, video, and do something quickly. So it's kind of neat. And then there's an option for the teacher to moderate that as well, and not let other students see those until the teacher looks at it. But then everybody can see everybody's responses. So it's kind of neat, and it's a way to keep people engaged and keep students engaged. So I haven't tried it yet, but I think it's kind of neat.
Very cool. All right, let me, can I take back over control, or do you have to give it to me? I think you have to give it to me.
You'll have to tell me how to do that. How to uncontrol.
Oh, I think I see where to do it. I just got to get it on my abort control. Okay.
I got to take a course on that one.
All right. So yeah, so that's a couple of third-party apps. Let me get my mouse back over here. Some other ones we wanted to look at are maybe more familiar in the corporate training space. There's one called LMS 365, which I don't actually have here. You can find it in the Teams App Store. I will say, I think this is the oldest one from eLearning Force. It is a fully functional LMS, and they also have some of their own training content as well. I will say I had a little trouble getting it to work, but these guys have been around for a long time and are pretty well known, primarily as a SharePoint LMS. It was originally an LMS for SharePoint, I believe, and then they brought it into Microsoft Teams as well. EdCast is another one, and let me show this. When we talk about third-party apps, there's several different ways they can integrate. I thought I had a slide on this, but it hasn't come up, so maybe I dreamed it. A lot of them will do what we've shown here, where they'll show up as a tab you can add inside a channel. For me personally, I think that works best. I've had less trouble with the apps that integrate that way. Several of them, like Marion showed with Quizlet, will, when you go to, let's say I'm in a channel here, well, that's not the right one. If I go here, in part of a conversation, I can share a Quizlet, whatever they call it, quiz deck. I'm not sure what their terminology is. And the same is true of some other ones as well. Here's the one for EdCast. Here's the one for Go1 that we'll look at in just a minute. Those might work, might not work. A lot of it depends on licensing and how the app's been set up. I saw somebody ask, does your company have to authorize these apps? It depends on the security policy at your company. I think the default is that you can add the app for yourself, but you can't add it across other people. Your administrators can add the app for all users. So if it is an app that you expect a lot of your users to use, I would definitely ask your IT administrators to add it for you. The other place where you'll see apps add sometimes is as a chatbot. And we have one. We have the BrainBot chatbot that we'll talk about in just a minute. Having said that, I will say that most of the chatbots that I've tried in Microsoft Teams, I've not been that impressed with. There have been some that I couldn't get to work, And there have been some that I just think that the functionality they're trying to do is better done somewhere else. And that seems to be the trend. We're seeing less and less of a focus on chatbots in general. They have their place. There's definitely some places where chatbots are exactly the right solution. But I think they were very trendy a couple of years ago. And maybe we're seeing now that all the stuff we thought chatbots could do, maybe there's some things, there's other tools they can do. The other place where you'll see apps integrate is over here on the left side menu. And you can see I have EdCast here on my left side menu. Generally, most third-party apps that you add are going to be here under the three-dot menu. If there's one that you go to a lot, like your Bigger Brains app or your BrainBot app, we hope, you can choose that. You can right-click on that and choose to pin it to your left side menu, and then it'll stay there. So you'll always see it. Again, administrators can pin that for all users. So if you want all your users to see it, they can do that. Let's really quickly talk about EdCast and Go1. They're both very similar. Go1 I don't have a demo of here. They're a little bit bigger maybe. They're partly owned by Microsoft. But both are a service where they have a library of content that you can make available to your users through their service. Now with EdCast, they're one where they have a chat service that I haven't been able to get to work, to be honest. But they also have a tab, and this I have been able to get to work. So you can use this to browse through whatever content you have licensed from them. So they have some free content. I was actually speaking to someone from EdCast yesterday, and he said they wanted to make sure that the out-of-the-box experience for users, even if they haven't paid for any kind of subscription or licensing from EdCast, they still wanted to make sure they had some stuff for that they could do with the app, which totally makes sense. We're doing the same thing with ours. But you can also sign up on their site and access courses that way. They've got a lot of features in here as far as building communities and recommended lists. They have some integration into your LMS or your LXP or your LRS. So if you're looking for that kind of content, especially that kind of LMS integration, I would definitely check out EdCast and Go1. We decided to do something similar. Actually, I say we decided. Our development team actually kind of built this and then brought it to us and said, hey, look what we can do. And we said, that's awesome. And so we are rolling out a Bigger Brains app. If you've used any of our content, well, let me do this. It looks better in a team. If you've used any of our content, we have about 170 courses. They're all video-based. Some have knowledge checks. Some of them have a tie-in to BrainBot. We'll talk about that in a minute. But normally you would access them through your LMS. You might access them through our website if you're a small business. But most companies buy the content from one of our training partners, and they're accessing it through the company LMS. Starting in a couple of weeks, you'll be able to use that same license that you got from your training provider and use it with the Teams app. So, for example, let's say I have this classroom and I want to make a channel for the entire library. I'll add a channel. I'll call it Course Library. I hope I spelled that right so nobody makes fun of me in the chat. And then from here, I'm going to add a tab. I'm going to add a tab using the BrainBot app. Oh, I haven't added it to this team yet, so I will. I need my license ID from my training provider. In my case, for demo purposes, is my email. I'm going to name this tab. I'll call it Training Library. And I get three choices of what the tab is going to be. Is it going to be all courses? Is it going to be a single course or a reporting tab? I'll choose all courses in this case and choose Save. And now it's created a tab called Training Library that has all of the Bigger Brains courses in it. So if I want to make a self-help or self-select library available to my users, this is a super simple way to do it. They can come in here if they're looking for, I don't know, Adobe Acrobat. They can start typing, they'll find the course, they can click through, and the course launches entirely here from inside Teams. After it's installed, where you need that license key to install it, but after that, there's no login. There's no passwords, there's nothing to remember, there's no links to go to. Everything happens here inside Microsoft Teams. So here we could take the Adobe Acrobat course, which is, whatever it is, 19 lessons long. I could jump straight to lesson 14 if I want to, and so on and so forth. Now, maybe I want to create a channel around a specific training topic. So maybe, it's that time of year and we need to make sure everybody goes through their mandatory workplace harassment training. So So we'll make a channel called Workplace Harassment Training. And here I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a tab from the Bigger Brains app. I'll enter my licensing ID again. I'm going to choose a single course. Now I can browse through the whole list. I can search if I want to, but I can also choose a category. So if I want my workplace harassment, that's here. Let's say I'm in California and I need the supervisor edition. I can choose that. I'll choose save. Now I forgot to name the tab in this case, so it gets the default name of Bigger Brains, but I can always come back and rename that. And so here, everybody in this team is going to have access to this course, and they'll be able to take it from right inside Microsoft Teams again.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rebecca.
So it's a great way to build a learning community around a single topic, because not only do you have the e-learning course, but you've also got all the regular Teams features. You've got your chat. I already had that open. So you can start a conversation, participate in a conversation. You can share additional files just like you can in any kind of Teams environment. And of course, the important thing is we need reporting to know who's done what. So we can add a reporting tab. I'll go back to General. I'll add a reporting tab here. Now the reporting tab shows up two different ways. And in the interest of time, I'm only going to show you this way. If you are a non-manager, then when you click on the reporting tab, all you see is your own results. When you're a manager, you see a dashboard that shows everyone's results, the top courses, activity in the last few days. I can run a user report, so I can say, let me see exactly what Alexandria has taken, and I can see the courses that she's completed and the courses that she has in progress. Or I can go the other way. I can say, you know what, I need to see who's completed that California course, which probably nobody has. Oh, no, a few people have. Okay. So some people started it. They haven't finished it because we're not in California, so why would they? But you can get that kind of reporting built into the system. A lot of questions I'm sure are going to be related to, does it integrate with my LMS, integrate with my LRS, integrate with my LXP? Coming soon. Let us know what features you need. This is very new for us. So we're looking forward to launching this. This will be available for our corporate customers in the next couple of weeks. It'll be available for our individual and small team customers later on this year, probably beginning of October. Let's see what questions we have here. Lots of people asking for recording. I was just joking about forgetting to send out the recording. I really do remember 87% of the time. Can we track which users completed the training? Yes. Can you add multiple courses? Yes, you can. So David asked, can you have multiple courses? You can. Each one would be its own tab. There's not currently a way to have one tab that's a partial library. So the tab is either all courses or it's just one course. But you could have 10 different courses or 10 different tabs that were just the one course. That's always a possibility. Where we got started as a company with Microsoft Teams was with our BrainBot app, which I know from looking at the registration list, a good number of you already use. We are launching a new version of that. We actually hoped it would be launched today, or last week actually, and it is, but it's not in the Teams App Store yet. The reason we created BrainBot was because there was a missing link in the way we did training. Like most people, we try to create great training materials. We try to create a great training event, which for us is an e-learning course. But then the user takes the course and then they walk away. And we know from science, since Ebbinghaus in the 1800s, that they're going to forget most of what they learned in that course. So basically their time, our money is wasted because they're going to forget most of what they learned. We also know that reinforcing that knowledge is not hard. We need to ask questions on a periodic basis to prompt their brain to think back on what they learned. That's what triggers the old part of their brain that this is important information that needs to be retained. The trick is, how do you do it on a scheduled basis over 60 days or 90 days or longer? And there's a lot of, this is where we first heard about it was Dr. Art Khan. If you ever see him at a DevLearn or ATD event, fantastic guy, great speaker, definitely recommended. some of the scientific studies behind why it works. If we had more time, I would go into it more, but we have another webinar recording that I'll send to you that will go into the science behind it in a lot more detail if you're interested. But the bottom line is sending spaced, effortful recall interactions is what causes our brain to retain the information. It's also a good way just to stay engaged with your learners, to have them hear from you and be receiving resources from you. Maybe it's handouts, maybe it's YouTube videos, maybe it's some new article you saw on a blog or something that again reinforce that knowledge that they've learned. A typical reinforcement schedule might look something like this. So over 60 days, they might get, I think this is a 12 or a 15 question reinforcement. There's a lot of apps that do this. You can do it yourself through email. A lot of LMSs now offer this feature as a learning booster. The problem with a lot of those is it happens inside the LMS, which again is an extra step for the learner to get to process it. There's several also that work via a mobile app, which is great. It also means the learner has to download and actually use the mobile app on their device, which we had a problem this week with one of our new employees that kept turning off Microsoft Teams on her mobile device. So it's not necessarily foolproof. We decided to build something inside Microsoft Teams that would do the same thing, and so we built this BrainBot training reinforcement app. So what BrainBot was originally designed to do is after you complete one of our courses, BrainBot will start asking you questions on a periodic basis, or sending you videos, or sending you, handouts and reinforcement materials to help you remember what you learned in the Excel course or the time management course or whatever. There's 8 types of interactions that it can send right now, and they look like this. So if you're in the Teams chat environment, you'll see BrainBot pop up on a scheduled basis, ask you a question, you answer the question. You can answer by typing. Sometimes it'll be buttons you can click. And it'll give you constructive feedback. So if you get it wrong, it'll correct you. If you get it right, it'll reinforce that. The big thing for a lot of you who have seen BrainBot before, with this new version that we're rolling out this week, or as soon as Microsoft approves it in the App Store, this version 1.9, it's now hosted in Azure for better security. We totally replaced the AI engines. The AI engine was using a tool called Raza. Now it's all based on Microsoft's Azure bot services. The biggest things are the interface is a lot improved. You'll find a lot of the places where you add questions as a teacher are much better than they used to be. There's a new interaction type, the new exact text. There's 3 new reports. You can now add multiple images and videos per interaction. When you send a small image, you can now, the learner can click on it to see a bigger version. That was a big complaint with the earlier versions. And we've added Microsoft 365 single sign-on for easy onboarding. So just to show you a real quick look at what BrainBot looks like, it shows up in a chat. And here I've just finished the demo sequence for BrainBot. If I'm a teacher, what's going to happen is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go to my sequences. I'm going to add a new sequence. Call this webinar. Notice that and I'm going quick here because I know we're coming up on the end of the hour, but the default schedule was every hour. Normally you would choose one of the other schedules. So the 333 through 666, these are the ones that are based on the scientific spacing, so they get further apart as they go out over a 60-day period. If you want to do something quick and simple, you can do the every 10-minute or the hourly schedule. We'll do the every 10-minute for this one. Back on the details screen, I can add a new question. I'm going to choose my question type. So let's say I want to do a simple text. This is one that's graded by the AI. So I can say, what color is the sun? Marion always makes fun of me because I have the world's stupidest questions when it comes to these demos, but it is what it is. I can give it a category. This is really just for yourself keeping track of what category or what level they are. I can add 3 different types of images. A header image that comes before the question, a before question image. The header image is really based on requests that you guys made for branding. So if you wanted to have your own logo or your organization logo show up first, you can do that now, and then have the question image, then have the question, then potentially have an after question image, or just have the question or an after question image. There was a lot of requests for being able to choose whether the image happens before or after the question. Well, now you can just choose it by picking which one you're going to do. You can add a video from YouTube or Vimeo. Then you type in the answers that you'll accept. and the AI will base its response on how close they came to the words that you gave it separated by commas, unless you check this box. This is one of the new features that makes it match exactly. And if they get it correct, you'd say something constructive. Wrong, you'd give them some corrective text. And now you can also add a feedback video and a feedback image. So if you wanted to re-add the lesson at the end or a piece of the lesson, or maybe a relevant YouTube video or something like that, again, to reinforce the knowledge, you can do that. And I will go ahead and save that. And so what happens is, I didn't add any images or video in this one, but to show you what it looks like, I'll just go ahead and do a preview in Teams. And over here on my Teams, this is in the demo one, so it should show up in SuperBot, and it did not. Did I not do that right? The preview might not be working. I'm in the staging one for the new app, so that might not be working. Oh, yep. Something's not working with the preview there. But I could start it. Choose to subscribe via Teams. Oh, it's because I've got it set to private, not public. So now it's going to begin sending me the list of questions on a scheduled basis. In this case, I only have the one, but you get the idea. If you want to have more information about BrainBot, we do have that other webinar where we go into it in a lot more detail. There's also a demo on the BrainBot website, www.brainbot.ai, that walks through that in more detail. And I know we're coming up on the top of the hour. I'm going to give you guys 2 more slides, then I'll take all these questions that have been popping up in the chat, and we'll make sure the recording goes out as well. So again, a lot of new improvements in the new version of BrainBot, great for employee onboarding, any kind of training, post-training reinforcement, post-training assessments. So pricing, here's the exciting part. All this stuff is pretty much free. The Bigger Brains Team app is free with our normal corporate licensing or individual licensing. So if you're already getting our courses, either in SCORM format or AICC format or whatever from your training provider, or if you're getting them through the portal from your IT provider, all of those will also give you access to the Teams app for free. If you don't have either one of those, you can also get it through our website. And the BrainBot Reinforcement app it's always been free for learners. Anybody can link to it at the end of our courses that have BrainBot Reinforcement. You get a link that goes straight to the page to sign up for that reinforcement booster. It's also free now for educational use. A lot of you may remember we started charging for this for the app when version 1.1 or 1.2 came out at the beginning of the year, and then the pandemic hit. And so we made it free through the end of September. We're coming up on the end of September, and we were kind of struggling with what to do. We still want to help teachers out, especially with this year coming up, which looks certainly like it's going to be a lot more virtual learning than in-class learning for a lot of people. And so we're going to continue to keep BrainBot totally free for the academic environment. If you're in a school, if you have an EDU email account, or you have you can certify that you're in an educational environment, then the BrainBot teacher accounts are entirely free. Just contact us for help with that. If you're in a corporate environment, it's still free through the end of October. And then after that, it's $29.99 per year for a teacher license. And that'll give you the ability to create your own unlimited content for BrainBot. For all of this, if you're interested in learning more, this top link, which I will send via the chat. Oops, I clicked on it, which was not the right thing to do. This will take you to a sample booster. And this sample booster not only demonstrates a little bit of what BrainBot can do, but it's also going to send you a link to that other webinar I talked about. It's going to ask you for your feedback on this webinar and on the apps, and ask you what else you'd like to see in the future, and give you some other information as well. You're also welcome to try out BrainBot for free at www.brainbot.ai, and of course you can email us anytime at sales@bigger-brains.com. And I have left myself all of 60 seconds for Q&A, so let's see what we have. Any plans of making streams more useful, like providing notifications? Yeah, good question. I don't really have any insight into that from Microsoft. It has seemed a little bit like a neglected stepchild lately in the Microsoft environment. I don't know. I don't know a good answer for that one. I will try to find out for you and let you know. Thanks. Okay. Oh, does it work with Cisco WebEx Teams? Ooh, interesting question. I do not know, but if you're interested in finding out, I'd be happy to give you a test file we could test it with and see. Email me offline, chip@vigor-brains.com, and we'd be happy to try that out and see. That's Where can we find the recording of this call? I'm going to pull the list of registrations, and so once the recording is available, probably tomorrow, we'll email everybody who registered, and you'll get the recording that way. So look for it as an email probably sometime tomorrow. And that's all the questions. Guys, thank you so much for participating. Really appreciate you guys being here. I hope this was useful for you. If you do have any other questions, if you have things you'd like to see, if you have improvements you'd like us to make in the apps or any other questions about Microsoft Teams, feel free to hit us up anytime. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and yeah, look forward to seeing you again on the next webinar.